The cargo ship Dauntless Dawn drifted through space like a dying whale. Its hull was covered in patches and welds that told the story of 1,000 small disasters. Captain Lee Tae-ho stood on the bridge, watching another warning light flash, red on his control panel. He sighed and hit the light with his fist. It stopped blinking. "Captain, the air recycler is making that noise again," called Engineer Kim Nari from below deck. Her voice echoed through the ship's old speakers with a metallic buzz. "Which noise?" Tae-ho asked, though he already knew. The ship made so many strange sounds that they had names for all of them. There was the grinding noise from the engine room, the whistling from the air vents, and the tapping that came from somewhere in the walls. The wheezing one, like an old man trying to breathe. Tae-ho nodded. The Dauntless Dawn was definitely an old man trying to breathe. She was 40 years old, which was ancient for a cargo ship. Most vessels her age had been scrapped long ago, but Tae-ho loved this ship, even if she was falling apart. "Can you fix it?" he asked. "I can try. But we need new parts. Real parts, not the junk we've been using." Tae-ho looked at their bank account on his screen. The numbers were not good. They had enough money for fuel and food, but nothing extra. New parts were expensive, and their last few cargo runs had barely paid for themselves. The bridge door slid, open with a grinding sound. Pilot Choi Min-seok walked in, his young face showing worry. At 25, he was the youngest member of the crew. He had joined them 6 months ago when his military service ended. "Captain, I'm getting reports from the news feeds. The hegemony is moving again." Tae-ho felt his stomach drop. The Galactic Hegemony was a collection of alien races that controlled most of the galaxy. They were powerful, advanced, and they did not like humans very much. For years, they had been slowly taking over human colonies at the edge of space. "Where, this time?" Tae-ho asked. "3 systems closer to Earth. They're saying it's for galactic peace and order." Min-seok made air quotes with his fingers. The last crew member, Weapons Officer Park So-jin, entered the bridge. She was a serious woman in her 30s who had served in the human military before joining the Dauntless Dawn. She did not smile much, but she was loyal and smart. "I heard," she said simply. "My old unit was stationed in the Kepler system." "No. Word from them in 2 weeks." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. When the hegemony took over a system, human military units just disappeared. Sometimes they found escape pods later. Sometimes they found nothing at all. "Well," Tae-ho said, trying to sound cheerful, "at least they're not interested in cargo, ships, especially not old, broken ones like ours." It was true. The hegemony had never bothered with civilian cargo vessels. They were after military targets and resource-rich colonies. A beat-up freighter carrying farm equipment and basic supplies was beneath their notice. Nari's voice came through the speakers again. "Captain, you need to see this. Come down to the cargo bay." Tae-ho frowned. Nari sounded different. Excited? Maybe. Or nervous. He left Min-seok on the bridge and walked through the ship's narrow corridors. The walls were lined with pipes and cables that had been added over the years. Nothing on the Dauntless Dawn was in its original place. The cargo bay was the largest space on the ship. Usually, it was filled with containers of goods they were hauling from one planet to another. Today, it looked different. Nari had moved several containers and opened up a section of the floor. "What are you doing?" Tae-ho asked. Nari was kneeling, next to an open panel. Inside, Tae-ho could see equipment he had never seen before. It looked new and expensive, which was impossible. They could not afford new equipment. I've been working on this for 2 years, Nari said quietly. Ever since I joined the crew. Working on what? Nari stood up. Her hands were dirty with grease, but her eyes were bright. Defense systems, real ones. Tejo stared at her. Nari, we're a cargo ship. We don't need defense systems, and we definitely can't afford them. I built them myself, from salvage and spare parts, some things I borrowed from my old job. Nari had worked for a big technology company before joining the crew. She had never talked much about why she left. Now Tai-Ho was starting to understand. What kind of defense systems? So-Jin asked. She had followed them down to the cargo bay. Nari walked over to another panel and opened it. Inside were more devices. That looked like nothing Tejo had ever seen. They hummed with quiet energy. Experimental stuff. Projects that the military said were too dangerous to use. Too unpredictable. They shelved the research and marked it classified. Dangerous how? Tejo asked. They work by changing the laws of physics in small areas. Gravity, time, matter. The military computers could not predict what would happen when they were used in real combat. So they decided not to use them. So-Jin whistled softly. And you stole the designs? I helped design them. I know how they work. And I know they work. Nari's voice was firm. I've been testing them in secret. Small tests, nothing that would show up on sensors. Tejo felt dizzy. His engineer had been building secret weapons in his cargo hold for 2 years. And he had never noticed. He was not sure if he should be impressed or angry. Why? He asked. Nari looked at him seriously. Because someone needs to be ready. The hegemony thinks humans are weak. They think we're primitive and harmless. They're taking our worlds one by one and no one is stopping them. We're just a cargo ship, Tejo said again. Right now, yes. But we could be more. The ship's intercom crackled to life. Minseok's voice was tense. Captain, you need to get back here. I'm picking up a distress signal. Tejo and his crew rushed back to the bridge. On the main screen, Minseok had brought up a star map. A red dot was blinking near their current position. It's coming from the Helena colony, Minseok said. They're under attack. Hegemony? So-Jin asked. Has to be. The signal is weak, but I can make out parts of it. They're asking for any ship in the area to help with evacuation. Tejo stared at the screen. Helena was a small farming colony with maybe 10,000 people. They had no military protection. If the hegemony was attacking them, those people had no chance. How far? He asked. 6 hours at full speed. Captain, So-Jin said quietly, we can't fight hegemony ships. We don't have weapons. Nari stepped forward. Actually, we do. The bridge was quiet except for the humming of the ship's old systems. Tai-Ho looked at his crew. Minseok was young and eager to help. So-Jin was a warrior who hated to run from a fight. Nari had been preparing for this moment for 2 years. If we do this, Tejo said slowly, we're not a cargo ship anymore. We're something else, something dangerous. The hegemony won't expect it, Nari said. They'll see us coming and think we're just another harmless human freighter. That's our advantage, So-Jin added. They underestimate us. Tejo looked at the red dot on the screen. 10,000 people who needed help. He thought about all. The colonies that had already fallen. All the people who had disappeared when the hegemony came. Set course for Helena, he said. Full speed. The dauntless Dawn turned toward the distant colony. In the cargo bay, hidden weapons hummed with power. The ship that no one feared was about to become something the galaxy would never forget. The dauntless Dawn raced through space toward Helena colony. In the engine room, the old fusion drive pushed harder than it had in years. Captain Lee Tae-ho could feel the ship shaking under the strain. "How long until we reach Helena?" he asked. "Pilot Choi Min-suk. 5 hours and 20 minutes, Min-suk replied. His hands moved quickly over the controls, trying to squeeze more speed from the aging engines. In the cargo bay, engineer Kim Na-ri worked frantically to bring her hidden weapons online. She had spent 2 years building them in secret, but she had never expected to use them so soon. The devices were spread throughout the cargo area, connected by cables she had run through the ship's walls. Weapons Officer Park So-jin watched Nari work. "Explain these weapons to me again," she said. Nari paused and wiped sweat from her forehead. "There are 4 main systems. The first one manipulates gravity in a small area. It can crush a ship or tear it apart." "How small an area?" "About the size of a large building. The effect lasts for 30 seconds. "So," Jin nodded. "That could destroy a hegemony cruiser if they got close enough." "What's the second system?" "Quantum disruptor torpedoes. They phase through normal shields and armor. Once they're inside an enemy ship, they explode and destroy everything around them." "Range?" "Short. Maybe 10 kilometers, and I only have 6 of them." So-jin frowned. Hegemony ships usually attacked from much farther away. "The third system?" "Nanite. Clouds. Microscopic robots that eat metal and electronics. I release them as a gas cloud and they spread through space. Any ship that flies through the cloud gets consumed from the inside. How fast do they work?" "Depends on the ship's size. A fighter would be gone in minutes. A big cruiser might take an hour." "And the fourth system?" Nari hesitated. "That one is different. It affects the structure of matter itself. It can make solid metal become like gas or turn energy into something solid." So Jin stared at her. "That sounds impossible. The science is real, but it's unpredictable. Sometimes it works perfectly, sometimes it does nothing, and sometimes—" Nari trailed off. "Sometimes what?" "Sometimes it affects things we don't want it to affect, like our own ship." Before So-jin could respond, the ship's intercom crackled. "Captain to the bridge immediately," Min-seok's voice said. He sounded worried. Tae-ho and So-jin rushed to the bridge. On the main screen, they could see what had upset Min-seok. 3 hegemony warships were moving away from Helena Colony. The colony itself was dark. "They're already finished," Min-seok said quietly. Tae-ho felt sick. They were too late. Helena Colony was gone, and 10,000 people with it. The hegemony. Ships were large and sleek, built for war. Next to them, the dauntless Dawn would look like a toy. "Captain," So-jin said, "we should turn around. We can't fight 3 warships." "No," Tae-ho said firmly. "We came here to help. And we're going to help." "Help who?" "Everyone on Helena is probably dead. Then we help make sure this doesn't happen again." Nari's voice came through the intercom. "Captain, I'm reading the colony's computer systems. There are survivors. Maybe 1,000 people hiding in the underground shelters." Tae-ho felt a spark of hope. "Can we get them out?" "Not with those hegemony ships still here. They're staying to make sure no one escapes." So Jin studied the tactical display. The hegemony ships are in a standard patrol formation, 1 heavy cruiser and 2 destroyers. They're moving slowly, scanning for survivors. "What's our best approach?" Tae-ho asked. "We don't have one. Captain, I know you want to help, but this is suicide. Our ship was built to carry cargo, not fight wars." Nari appeared on the bridge, her hands still covered in grease. "Actually, we do have an advantage. They won't see us as a threat. Because we're not a threat, Sojin said. Because they think we're not a threat. There's a difference. Nari moved to the sensor station. Look at our ship from their perspective. We're old, slow, and unarmed. We're exactly what they expect from humans. Weak and harmless. We are weak and harmless, Minseok pointed out. No, we're not. Not anymore. Nari turned to face the others. I've been monitoring hegemony communications for months. They're overconfident. They think humans are so primitive that we can't possibly threaten them. They're right, Sojin said. Are they? Nari asked. Captain, what's the first rule of cargo hauling? Taeho thought for a moment. Never let the customer know what you're really carrying. Exactly. We've been hauling cargo for years, and half the time we didn't tell the customs officials what was really in our holds. We're good at hiding things. So Jin was beginning to understand. You want us to pretend we're just a cargo ship that happened to be in the area. More than that. I want us to pretend we're trying to run away. Act scared and helpless. Let them get close before we show them what we can really do. Taeho looked at the tactical display. The hegemony ships were powerful, but they were also spread out. If the Dauntless Dawn could get close to one of them, it's still suicide, Sojin said. Even if we destroy one ship, the other two will kill us. Maybe, Nari said, but maybe not. My weapons don't work like normal weapons. The hegemony won't know how to defend against them. Because no one has ever used them before? Because no one has ever been crazy enough to use them before. The bridge was quiet except for the humming of the ship's systems. On the screen, the hegemony ships continued their patrol. Below them, 1,000 people hid in underground shelters, waiting to be found and killed. Captain, Minseok said quietly, what are your orders? Taeho stared at the screen. His whole life, he had avoided trouble. He hauled cargo from one place to another, kept his head down, and tried not to get noticed. It was a safe life, but not a meaningful one. Nari, how long to bring all your weapons online? 20 minutes. Sojin, what's the best way to approach without seeming threatening? Sojin studied the display. We come in from the side, broadcast a standard cargo manifest, and request permission to pick up any survivors. Act like we have no idea how dangerous the situation is. And when they scan us, they'll see exactly what we want them to see. An old cargo ship with minimal shields and no weapons. They might even laugh. Taeho made his decision. Do it. Set course for Helena Colony. Nari, get your weapons ready. So Jin, prepare a cargo manifest. Something boring. What kind of cargo? Sojin asked. Agricultural equipment. Farming tools. The most harmless thing you can think of. As the crew prepared for battle, the Dauntless Dawn changed course toward Helena Colony. From the outside, she still looked like a harmless old freighter. Inside, experimental weapons hummed with power. The hegemony ships noticed the approaching human vessel. On the bridge of the heavy cruiser, Admiral Vextar studied the sensor readings with amusement. Another human cargo ship, he told his crew. They're like insects. No matter how many we step on, more keep appearing. Should we destroy it? Asked his weapons officer. Not yet. Let's see what it wants. Perhaps it will provide some entertainment before we kill it. The Dauntless Dawn flew closer to the alien ships. In 20 minutes, Nari would be ready. In 20 minutes, the galaxy would learn that sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that looks like prey. The Dauntless Dawn approached the hegemony patrol fleet with all the confidence of a mouse walking toward a pack of wolves. Captain Lee Taeho sat in his command chair trying to look calm while his heart pounded in his chest. Incoming transmission. "From the lead ship," pilot Choi Min-seok reported. "Put it on screen." The bridge's main display flickered, then showed the face of Admiral Vexitar. The alien had gray skin, 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, and a mouth full of sharp teeth. He looked at the humans with the same expression someone might use when finding an insect in their food. "Human vessel," Vexitar said in accented English. "You are in a restricted military zone. State your business." Taeho stood up and tried to look nervous. It was not hard. "Admiral, sir, we're just a cargo ship. We received a distress signal from Helena Colony and came to offer assistance." Vexitar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "There are no survivors on Helena. The colony has been pacified. But, sir, we have medical supplies and emergency equipment. If there's anyone hurt down there, there is no one down there." Vexitar's voice was flat and cold. "Leave this system immediately, or we will consider you a threat." Taeho glanced at Weapons Officer Park So-jin, who nodded slightly. They were now close enough to the hegemony ships for Nari's weapons to work. "Of course, Admiral. We'll leave right away. We don't want any trouble." Taeho cut the transmission and turned to his crew. "Nari, are you ready?" Engineer Kim Nari's voice came through the intercom from the cargo bay. "All systems are online, Captain. Which weapon should I use first?" "The gravity disruptor. Target the heavy cruiser." On the tactical display, the 3 hegemony ships formed a triangle around the Dauntless Dawn. The heavy cruiser was directly ahead, with the 2 destroyers on either side. It was a standard formation for dealing with a single enemy ship. What the aliens did not know was that the Dauntless Dawn was no ordinary enemy. "Target locked," Nari reported. "Gravity disruptor ready to fire." "Wait for my signal," Taeho said. He wanted the hegemony ships to relax, to think the humans were actually leaving. The Dauntless Dawn began to turn away from Helena Colony. On the bridge of his cruiser, Admiral Vexitar watched with satisfaction. Another human had learned to fear the hegemony's power. "Should we follow them out of the system?" asked his tactical officer. "No need. They're just cargo haulers. Harmless." That was exactly what Taeho was waiting to hear. "Nari, fire!" In the cargo bay of the Dauntless Dawn, a device the size of a refrigerator hummed with power. Nari had built it from stolen military designs and salvaged parts. According to the theory, it could create a localized gravity field strong enough to crush a battleship. The theory was about to be tested. A beam of invisible energy shot out from the cargo ship toward Vexitar's cruiser. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then space itself began to twist around the alien vessel. Vexitar felt the artificial gravity on his ship fluctuate. "What was that?" he demanded. Before anyone could answer, the cruiser's hull began to buckle. The gravity disruptor was creating a field with the strength of a black hole in a space the size of the ship's bridge. Metal that had been forged in the heart of a star began to crumple like paper. "Emergency power to structural integrity," Vexitar shouted, but it was too late. The heavy cruiser folded in on itself with a sound like thunder. In 30 seconds, a ship that had taken 5 years to build was compressed into a ball of twisted metal no larger than a car. The gravity field collapsed, and the remains of the cruiser drifted through space like cosmic debris. Aboard the Dauntless Dawn, the crew watched in stunned silence. Even Nari had not been sure the gravity disruptor would work so well. "Target destroyed," Min-seok whispered. The 2 remaining hegemony destroyers broke formation and began emergency maneuvers. Their commanders had never seen anything like what had just happened. One moment their flagship had been there, the next it was gone. "Unknown weapon," the destroyer captain transmitted on an open frequency. "The human ship has an unknown weapon." Admiral Vextar was dead, compressed into the twisted remains of his flagship. Command of the patrol fleet fell to Captain Zekmore of the destroyer Vengeance. He was younger than Vextar and more aggressive. "All ships open fire on the human vessel," he ordered. "Destroy it immediately." Energy beams lanced out from both destroyers toward the dauntless Dawn. The cargo ship's shields flared as they absorbed the impact. Warning lights flashed on the bridge. "Shields down to 60%, Sojin reported. "We can't take much more of that." "Nari, what else do you have?" Taeho asked. "Quantum torpedoes, but I need to get closer to use them." "How much closer?" 5 kilometers. Taeho looked at the tactical display. The destroyers were trying to keep their distance now, firing from 20 kilometers away. They had learned to respect the human ship. "Minseok, can you get us closer?" The young pilot grinned. "Watch me." The dauntless Dawn suddenly accelerated toward the nearest destroyer. The move was so unexpected that the alien ship's gunners could not adjust their aim fast enough. Energy beams that should have hit the cargo ship instead passed harmlessly through empty space. "Impossible!" Captain Zekmore snarled. "No cargo ship can maneuver like that." But Minseok had learned to fly in the asteroid fields around Earth's moon. He knew how to make a ship dance through space like it was alive. The dauntless Dawn twisted and turned, avoiding most of the enemy fire. 4 kilometers, Minseok reported. 3 kilometers. "Quantum torpedoes ready," Nari called out. "Fire!" 2 small objects shot out from the cargo ship. They looked like ordinary missiles, but they behaved in a very unusual way. Instead of traveling through normal space, they shifted into a quantum state that allowed them to pass through matter. The destroyer's shields meant nothing to the quantum torpedoes. The ship's armor was useless. The torpedoes passed through the hull as if it were not there, then materialized inside the destroyer's engine room. The explosion that followed tore the ship apart from the inside. Without warning, half the destroyer simply vanished in a ball of flame. The other half spun away into space, venting atmosphere and debris. Captain Zekmore was on the remaining destroyer. Retribution. He stared at his tactical display in horror. In less than 5 minutes, the human cargo ship had destroyed 2 hegemony warships, ships that were supposed to be invincible. "Retreat," he ordered. "Emergency jump to hyperspace." "Sir, our jump engines need 2 minutes to charge." "Then give me 2 minutes." The Retribution began backing away from the dauntless Dawn, firing desperately. But Minseok kept the cargo ship moving, and most of the shots missed. "Should we pursue?" Sojin asked. Taeho thought about it. They could probably destroy the last destroyer. But then what? More hegemony ships would come looking for their missing patrol. And next time, they would be ready for unusual weapons. "Let them go," he decided. "We have survivors to evacuate." The Retribution jumped into hyperspace, carrying Captain Zekmore and his terrified crew back to hegemony space. They brought with them a story that no one would believe. A human cargo ship had destroyed 2 hegemony warships using weapons that defied physics. The ship that every alien had dismissed as harmless had turned out to be the most dangerous vessel in the sector. As the dauntless Dawn descended toward Helena Colony to rescue the survivors, news of the battle spread through hegemony communication networks. For the first time in decades, alien commanders began to fear something. They began to fear humans. But more specifically, they began to fear a battered old cargo ship that looked like it should fall apart in a strong wind. The ship that had just announced to the galaxy that humanity was not as weak as everyone thought. The ship that no one had feared was about to become the most wanted vessel in known space. 3 weeks after the battle at Helena Colony, the Dauntless Dawn had become the most famous ship in human space and the most wanted ship in hegemony territory. Captain Lee Tae-ho stood in the rescued colony's emergency shelter, watching the news reports on a portable screen. The Hegemony High Command has issued a galaxy-wide alert, the human news reporter said. They're offering a reward of 10 million credits for information leading to the capture of the cargo vessel Dauntless Dawn and her crew. Tae-ho turned off the screen and looked at the 1,000 Helena survivors they had rescued. Most were families, with children. They looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and worry. "Captain," said Dr. Lee Young-mi, the colony's chief medical officer, "what will you do now? The hegemony will never stop hunting you." "We keep fighting," Tae-ho said simply. "As long as they're hunting us, they're not attacking more colonies." Back. On the ship, engineer Kim Nari was working in the cargo bay. She had been busy for days, building new weapons from the salvaged remains of the hegemony ships they had destroyed. Alien technology was more advanced than human tech, but Nari was learning how to improve her designs. "How are the new systems coming?" asked Weapons Officer Park So-jin. "Better than I hoped," Nari replied. She pointed to a device that hummed with blue energy. "This is a quantum torpedo launcher that uses hegemony targeting computers, much more accurate than my old ones. Range? 50 kilometers now. And I can build more torpedoes using the alien metal we salvaged." "So," Jin nodded approvingly. "What about that?" She pointed to another device that looked like a metallic cloud in a glass container. "Improved nanite swarm. The original version. Just 8 metal. This one can also disrupt energy systems and life support. Plus, it spreads faster." "How much faster?" "A fighter would be consumed in 30 seconds, a cruiser in 15 minutes. Pilot Choi Min-seok entered the cargo bay. "Captain wants to see everyone on the bridge. We're getting reports of hegemony activity in the Kepler system." The crew gathered on the bridge, where Tae-ho was studying a star map. Red dots marked known hegemony positions, while blue dots showed human colonies. "Intelligence reports say the hegemony is building up forces in 3 systems," Tae-ho explained. "They're preparing for a major offensive against Earth itself." "How major?" So-jin asked. 200 ships, the largest fleet they've ever assembled. The bridge was quiet for a moment. Even with their new weapons, the Dauntless Dawn could not fight 200 ships. "There's something else," Tae-ho continued. "The hegemony has a new commander, Admiral Mordak. He's requested personal command of the hunt for our ship." Nari looked up from her tablet. "I've heard of him. He's never lost a battle. The hegemony calls him the Destroyer of Worlds." "Cheerful," Min-seok muttered. "The good news is that we're becoming a symbol," Tae-ho said. "Human resistance groups throughout the galaxy are using our ship's image on their flags. Some are even naming their operations after us." "That's not good news," So-jin pointed out. "That makes us even bigger targets." "True. But it also means we're not alone anymore. The hegemony wanted humans to feel helpless. Now they know we can fight back." Nari pulled up a holographic display of the local star systems. "Captain, I have an idea. Instead of waiting for them to find us, what if we hunt them?" "Explain." "The hegemony fleet needs supplies, food, fuel, replacement parts. They have supply convoys moving between their bases. If we start attacking those convoys, they'll have to divert ships to protect them. Sojin finished. Ships they need for their offensive against Earth. Exactly. And supply ships are usually lightly defended. Our weapons would be perfect for hit-and-run attacks. Taeho studied the star map. Nari was right. The hegemony had never had to worry about protecting their supply lines before. No one had been able to threaten them. It's dangerous, he said. Once we start attacking supply convoys, every hegemony ship in the sector will be looking for us. They're already looking for us, Min-Seok pointed out. True. But this would make it personal. Admiral Mordak would stop at nothing to destroy us. Then we'd better make sure he doesn't catch us, Nari said with a grin. 2 days later, the Dauntless Dawn intercepted a hegemony supply convoy near the edge of the Vega system. 3 cargo ships protected by a single destroyer. It should have been an easy victory for the aliens. It was not. The hegemony destroyer captain, Corvell, saw the human ship approaching and laughed. Just one cargo vessel? This will be over quickly, but as the destroyer moved to attack, Nari released her improved nanite swarm. The microscopic robots spread through space like an invisible cloud. When the destroyer flew through the swarm, the nanites immediately began eating through the ship's hull. What is happening? Corvell demanded as his ship's systems began failing. Why are our weapons offline? The nanites had reached the destroyer's main computer core. In seconds, they consumed the circuits that controlled the ship's weapons, engines, and life support. The destroyer drifted helplessly as its crew suffocated in the dark. The 3 supply ships tried to escape, but Min-Seok was too skilled a pilot. The Dauntless Dawn caught each one and disabled them with quantum torpedoes. The cargo ships surrendered without firing a shot. This is Captain Taeho of the human vessel Dauntless Dawn, he broadcast to the supply ships. Abandon your vessels. Immediately. You have 10 minutes. The alien crews did not argue. They had heard the stories about the ship that destroyed Admiral Vextar's fleet. They evacuated to their escape pods and watched as the Dauntless Dawn towed their ships away. The supplies on those ships would feed a human colony for months. More importantly, they would not reach the hegemony fleet that was preparing to attack. Earth.news of the convoy attack spread quickly through hegemony space. Admiral Mordak received the report while on his flagship, the massive dreadnought Inevitable Victory. A single human ship destroyed 4 of our vessels? He asked his intelligence. Officer, yes, sir. The same ship that destroyed Admiral Vextar's patrol fleet. Mordak studied the tactical reports. The human weapons were unlike anything the hegemony had encountered. They seemed to work by changing the fundamental laws of physics. How is that possible? We don't know, sir. Our scientists are analyzing the wreckage, but the technology is completely alien to us. Alien? They're humans. Primitives. Perhaps we have underestimated them, sir. Mordak's 4 eyes narrowed. He had conquered 17 worlds for the hegemony. He had never been defeated in battle. He would not let a single human cargo ship ruin his perfect record. Double the escorts for all supply convoys, he ordered, and send word to all fleet commanders. Any ship that encounters the Dauntless Dawn is to destroy it immediately. No attempts at capture, no negotiations. Total annihilation. Yes, sir. And put out word through our intelligence networks. I want to know everything about this ship and its crew, where they came from, where they've been, what they're planning, everything. As Mordak's orders spread through the hegemony fleet, the Dauntless Dawn struck again. This time, they attacked a fuel depot in the Centauri system. Nari's matter disruptor turned the station's metal hull into gas, and the entire facility collapsed into space. Then they hit a weapons convoy near Proxima. The nanite swarm consumed 6 transport ships in minutes, along with enough firepower to arm a battle fleet. Each attack made the hegemony more desperate to find them. Each victory made the Dauntless Dawn more famous among humans and more feared among aliens. But Admiral Mordak was learning. He was studying the human ship's tactics, looking for patterns, and slowly, he was laying a trap. The hunter was about to become the hunted, but first, the hunter would claim a few more victims. The mess hall on Hegemony battleship Crushing Fist was unusually quiet. Normally, alien crew members would be laughing and talking during their meal period. Tonight, they spoke in whispers or not at all. Commander Theknall noticed the mood and frowned. "What's wrong with everyone?" he asked his first officer. "They're talking about the death ship again, sir," replied Lieutenant Vostar. Death ship? That's what the crews are calling the human vessel Dauntless Dawn. They say it appears without warning, destroys everything in sight, then vanishes like a ghost. Theknall snorted. "Superstitious nonsense. It's just a cargo ship with some unusual weapons." "Yes, sir. But the stories are spreading through the entire fleet. Some crews are refusing assignments to sectors where the ship has been spotted." This was a problem. Hegemony military discipline was legendary, but fear could break even the strongest soldiers. Theknall had to admit that the human ship's recent attacks had been disturbing. Just last week, the Dauntless Dawn had attacked a mining operation in the Tau Ceti system. According to the survivors, the ship had appeared from nowhere, destroyed 6 escort vessels in minutes, then disappeared again before reinforcements could arrive. The mining station's commander had described weapons that turned space inside out and made metal flow like water. His report had been so bizarre that Fleet Command thought he was suffering from combat stress. But similar reports were coming from all over Hegemony space. Ship captains who had never met were describing identical, impossible weapons. Crews who had fought the Dauntless Dawn and Liv spoke of a ship that seemed to break the laws of physics. On the bridge of his flagship Inevitable Victory, Admiral Mordak studied the latest intelligence reports. In 6 weeks, the human ship had destroyed or captured 47 Hegemony vessels. More importantly, it had disrupted supply lines throughout 3 sectors. "Sir," said his intelligence officer, "we're getting reports that some of our client species are reconsidering their loyalty to the Hegemony." "Which species?" "The Velthari Confederation has stopped sending tribute ships. The Zornak Empire is asking for clarification of our protection guarantees." Mordak felt a chill of worry. The Hegemony controlled hundreds of species through a combination of military strength and fear. If that fear began to crack, the entire empire could collapse. What are they saying? That if the mighty Hegemony cannot stop one human cargo ship, perhaps it is not as strong as it claims to be. The Admiral's claws extended unconsciously. A single ship cannot threaten the entire Hegemony. No, sir. But it can threaten the idea of Hegemony invincibility, and that may be more dangerous. Meanwhile, aboard the Dauntless Dawn, Captain Lee Tae-ho was dealing with his own problems. The ship's fame was spreading faster than he had expected, and not all the attention was welcome. "Captain," Pilot Choi Min-seok reported, "we're getting messages from human resistance groups throughout the galaxy. They want to join us." "How many?" "Messages? 300 and counting. Some are offering to send ships. Others want us to lead attacks on Hegemony targets." Tae-ho rubbed his tired eyes. 3 months ago, he had been hauling farm equipment between backwater colonies. Now people were treating him like some kind of military genius. "What do you think?" he asked Weapons Officer Park So-jin. "It's tempting," she admitted. With a fleet of ships, we could hit bigger targets, maybe even threaten a hegemony base. But we're not military commanders. We're just 4 people on a cargo ship who got lucky. Engineer Kim Nari joined them on the bridge. Actually, I think we should stay small, she said. Our advantage is that the hegemony doesn't understand us. If we start acting like a normal military force, they'll figure out how to fight us. Explain, Taeho said. Right now, they're trying to use standard tactics against us. Fleet formations, long-range combat, superior numbers. None of that works against our weapons. So if we build a fleet, they'll adapt. They'll find ways to counter our technology. But as long as we're just one ship doing impossible things, they can't predict what we'll do next. Taeho thought about this. Nari was probably right. The Dauntless. Dawn was effective because it was completely unpredictable. A fleet of ships would be just another military target. We stay as we are, he decided. Tell the resistance groups we appreciate their support, but we work alone. Some of them won't like that, Min Seok warned. Some of them will think we're selfish or cowardly, So Jin added. Let them think whatever they want. We're not trying to win a popularity contest. We're trying to save humanity. The conversation was interrupted by an alert from the ship's sensors. Unknown vessel approaching, Min Seok reported. It's strange. On the main screen, they could see a ship unlike anything they had encountered before. It was clearly alien, but not hegemony design. The hull was covered in organic-looking curves and patterns. I'm receiving a transmission, Min Seok said. Put it through. The screen showed the face of an alien Taeho did not recognize. It had pale blue skin and large black eyes. When it spoke, its voice was melodic and strange. Greetings, humans of the vessel, Dauntless Dawn. I am Ambassador Silnith of the Free Worlds Coalition. Free Worlds Coalition? Taeho had never heard of them. We represent species that have broken free from hegemony control. We have been watching your activities with great interest. What do you want? To offer our assistance. The hegemony has been our enemy for centuries. Any force that can make them afraid is a force we wish to support. Taeho glanced at his crew. This was unexpected. What kind of assistance? Information, safe harbor, supplies. Perhaps most importantly, we can tell you where the hegemony is most vulnerable. In exchange for what? Continue doing what you are doing. Be the ghost that haunts their dreams. Be the nightmare that makes them question their own strength. After the alien ship departed, the crew of the Dauntless Dawn discussed the offer. The Free Worlds Coalition could provide valuable intelligence about hegemony operations, but allying with other aliens might compromise their independence. I say we take the deal, So Jin said. We need all the help we can get. I'm not sure, Nari replied. What if it's a trap? What if the hegemony is using these aliens to find us? Possible, Taeho agreed. But we're already being hunted by every hegemony ship in the galaxy. A few more enemies won't make much difference. And a few allies might make all the difference, Min Seok added. As they debated, reports continued to arrive from across hegemony space. The Dauntless Dawn had become more than just a ship. It was a symbol of resistance, a proof that the hegemony could be fought and beaten. On dozens of worlds, resistance groups painted the ship's image on walls and broadcast its story through hidden networks. The name Dauntless Dawn became a battle cry for oppressed species throughout the galaxy. But symbols could be dangerous things. The more famous the ship became, the more desperately the hegemony wanted to destroy it. Admiral Mordak was already planning something special for the human vessel, something that would end the legend once and for all. In the depths of space, the dauntless Dawn continued its lonely mission. 4 humans against an empire of billions. It should have been hopeless. Instead, it was becoming the stuff of legends. Admiral Mordak stood before the holographic display in his war room, studying the movements of the dauntless Dawn over the past 2 months. Red dots marked the locations of hegemony ships the human vessel had destroyed. There were now over 60 of them. "Have you found a pattern?" he asked his tactical analyst. "Yes, sir," replied Commander Zekthos. "The human ship prefers to attack isolated targets, supply convoys, mining operations, communication stations. They avoid large fleet concentrations." Intelligent. They know they cannot win a direct battle against superior numbers. "There's something else, sir. They seem to have detailed information about our operations. They always know exactly where our vulnerable targets will be." Mordak's 4 eyes narrowed. "A spy? Possibly. Or they're getting help from one of the rebel species." The Admiral had suspected as much. No single ship could gather intelligence that accurate without assistance. The humans had allies somewhere in the galaxy. What about their weapons? Have our scientists learned anything useful? Zekthos looked uncomfortable. "The research teams are having difficulties, sir. The weapon fragments we've recovered don't seem to follow any known principles of physics." Meaning our scientists think the humans have discovered something completely new, a form of technology that can manipulate the fundamental forces of reality. Mordak felt a chill. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered anything like this. The hegemony's power was based on technological superiority. If humans had developed something beyond hegemony science— "Sir," Zekthos continued, "I have a recommendation." "Speak." "We stopped trying to hunt them down with conventional tactics. Instead, we set a trap, something too tempting for them to resist." "What kind of trap?" Zekthos activated another holographic display. It showed a detailed star map of the Rigel system. "Intelligence reports indicate that there's a human colony here that the hegemony hasn't attacked yet. 50,000 people on a remote agricultural world. And we stage a fake attack on the colony, make it look like we're preparing to destroy it. When the dauntless Dawn comes to help, we'll be waiting with overwhelming force." Mordak smiled, showing his sharp teeth. "How many ships?" 30 battle cruisers, hidden in the asteroid field beyond the colony. When the human ship enters the system, we spring the trap. Do it. 3. Days later, the dauntless Dawn received an emergency transmission while hidden in the shadow of a dead moon. Captain Lee Tae-ho listened to the message with growing alarm. "This is Governor Kim Hye-jin of New Seoul Colony," the voice said. "We're detecting massive hegemony fleet movements near our system. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help. We have 50,000 civilians here and no military protection." Pilot Choi Min-seok looked up from his console. "Captain, New Seoul is only 2 days away at maximum speed." "I've heard of that colony," Weapons Officer Park So-jin said. "It's one of the most isolated human settlements, mostly farmers and their families. Engineer Kim Na-ri was studying the sensor data that had come with the message. The hegemony force is large, at least 20 ships, maybe more." Tae-ho stared at the star map on his screen. New Seoul was exactly the kind of target the hegemony liked to attack. Defenseless civilians who couldn't fight back. "It could be a trap," So-jin warned. "The timing is convenient. A defenseless colony just happens to be threatened right when we're in the area. Maybe, Tejo admitted. But what if it's not? What if 50,000 people die because we were too suspicious to help them? Captain, Nari said quietly, I've been analyzing hegemony attack patterns. They usually move fast, strike hard and leave. But according to this data, they're taking their time with New Soul, building up forces slowly, like they're waiting. For something, Minseok added. The bridge was quiet for a moment. Everyone knew what the hegemony might be waiting for. Even if it is a trap, Tejo said finally, we can't let innocent people die. Set course for New Soul, maximum speed. As the dauntless Dawn raced through hyperspace toward the threatened colony, Admiral Mordak received confirmation that his bait had been taken. The human ship left its hiding place 3 hours ago, reported his intelligence officer. They're heading directly for the Rigel system. Excellent. Signal all ships in the trap formation. When the humans arrive, wait for my command before revealing yourselves. Yes, sir. Should we attempt to capture the ship intact? No. Destroy it completely. I want nothing left but debris. 2 days later, the dauntless Dawn dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Rigel system. The crew immediately began scanning for hegemony ships. I'm reading 12 vessels in orbit around New Soul, Minseok reported. Standard battle formation. Only 12? Sojin frowned. The intelligence report said 20 or more. Maybe some of them left, Nari suggested, but she didn't sound convinced. Tejo studied the tactical display. Something felt wrong about this situation. The hegemony ships were positioned oddly, spread out instead of concentrated. It was almost as if they wanted to leave room for something else. Nari, can you scan the asteroid field beyond the planet? The engineer's fingers danced over her controls. After a moment, her face went pale. Captain, there are ships hiding in those asteroids. Lots of them. How many? At least 30, maybe more. They're using the asteroids to hide their energy signatures. Sojin whistled softly. It's definitely a trap. Should we retreat? Minseok asked. Tejo looked at the colony on his screen. New Soul was a small world covered in farms and villages. 50,000 people who had never hurt anyone were about to become victims of an interstellar war. No, he said firmly. We came here to save those people, and that's what we're going to do. Captain, Sojin protested, we can't fight 42 ships. Even with our weapons, the odds are impossible. Maybe, but Nari, you said you had something new. Something you've been working on in secret. The engineer nodded slowly. The stellar destabilizer. But Captain, I've never tested it. And the risks? What kind of risks? If it works wrong, it could destroy this entire star system, including us and the colony we're trying to save. And if it works right, it could destroy every hegemony ship in the system. The energy release would be enormous. Tejo thought about the 50,000 people on New Soul. He thought about all the colonies the hegemony had already destroyed. He thought about Admiral Mordak and his arrogant certainty that humans were weak and helpless. Prepare the destabilizer and get ready to transmit a message to the colony. Tell them to take shelter in the deepest bunkers they have. As the dauntless Dawn moved toward the hegemony fleet, Admiral Mordak watched from his flagship hidden among the asteroids. The human ship was flying directly into his trap, just as he had planned. All ships, prepare to reveal positions. He commanded, in 60 seconds, we will destroy the most wanted ship in the galaxy. But aboard the cargo vessel that no one had feared, Engineer Kim Nari was powering up a weapon that could turn a star into a bomb. The trap was about to become a nightmare for everyone involved. The dauntless Dawn had one chance to save 50,000 lives, one chance to break the hegemony's power forever. One chance to prove that sometimes the smallest ship can carry the biggest surprise. The dauntless Dawn limped through space toward the new Sol system, her hull scarred and blackened from the battle at Admiral Mordak's trap. 3 days had passed since they had barely escaped the ambush, and the ship was running on emergency power. Structural integrity at 40%, Engineer Kim Nari reported from the cargo bay. Main engines are offline. We're running on backup thrusters only. Captain Lee Tae-ho winced as another system alarm sounded on the bridge. They had managed to destroy 8 hegemony ships before escaping, but the cost had been severe. The stellar destabilizer had worked, but not as Nari had planned. Instead of destroying the entire enemy fleet, it had created a solar flare that disabled both sides. "How long until main power is restored?" he asked. 6 hours, maybe 8. "But Captain, there's something else. The destabilizer didn't just drain our power. It changed our fusion core. The energy patterns are completely different now." "Different how?" "I'm not sure yet. But the readings are off the charts. It's like our reactor is trying to become a miniature star." Pilot Choi Min-seok looked up from his console. "Captain, I'm picking up multiple hegemony signals. They're coming from all directions." Weapons Officer Park So-jin studied the tactical display with growing alarm. "It's not just a few ships. It's everything. The entire hegemony fleet is converging on our position." Tae-ho felt his heart sink. Admiral Mordak had survived the ambush, and now he was bringing every ship he could find to finish the job. On the screen, red dots appeared throughout the star system, hundreds of them. "How many ships?" he asked quietly. 237 capital ships, So-jin replied, plus escorts and support vessels. It's the largest fleet ever assembled. Nari's voice came through the intercom, tight with worry. "Captain, they're not just coming to destroy us. Long-range sensors show troop transports mixed in with the battle fleet." "Troop transports? They're planning to invade Earth. This fleet is heading straight for the Sol system after they finish with us." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. If the hegemony fleet destroyed the dauntless Dawn and continued to Earth, humanity was doomed. There were no other ships that could stop them. "Options?" Tae-ho asked. "We could try to run," Min-seok suggested. "Jump to hyperspace before they get here. With our engines damaged, we'd be lucky to make one jump before they caught us." "We could surrender," So-jin said reluctantly. "Tell them we'll give up in exchange for sparing Earth." "They won't honor that deal. Once they have us, they'll attack Earth anyway." Nari appeared, on the bridge, her face grim. "There is one other option, but you're not going to like it." "Tell me." "The fusion core is unstable now. The stellar destabilizer changed its quantum structure. If I remove the safety controls, it would explode," Tae-ho finished. "More than explode. It would create a cascade reaction that turns our entire ship into a fusion bomb. The energy release would be equivalent to a supernova. That would destroy everything in the system, including us." "Including us," Nari agreed. "But also including the entire hegemony fleet." So-jin stared at her. "You're talking about suicide." "I'm talking about saving Earth. 200 ships are heading for our home world. If we don't stop them here, billions of people will die." The crew looked at each other in the dim light of the damaged bridge. They had always known this mission might end in death, but knowing it and facing it were different things. "There has to be another way," Min-seok said. "Like what?" Nari asked. We have one damaged cargo ship against the largest fleet in galactic history. Our weapons are powerful, but they're not that powerful. Tai-Ho studied the tactical display. The hegemony ships were arranged in a perfect sphere around their position. Admiral Mordak was taking no chances this time. There was no escape route, no clever tactic that could save them. How long until the fleet arrives? He asked. 3 hours, Minsuk replied. And how long to prepare the fusion cascade? 2 hours, Nari said. But Captain, once I start the process, there's no stopping it. We'd have maybe 30 minutes before we die, Tai-Ho finished. I understand. He walked to the main viewport and looked out at the stars. Somewhere among those points of light was Earth, the world where humanity had been born, where children played in parks and artists created beautiful things, and scientists dreamed of exploring the galaxy. Captain, Sojin said softly, we could record a message. Tell people what we did and why. No, Tai-Ho replied. Let them remember us as the crew of a cargo ship who refused to give up. That's enough. On his flagship, Inevitable Victory, Admiral Mordak watched the massive fleet converge on the human ship's position. He had called in favors from across the hegemony to assemble this force. Ships that had never worked together were now united in a single purpose: destroy the dauntless Dawn. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, all ships are in position. The human vessel is trapped. Excellent. Have they attempted to communicate? No, sir. They're maintaining radio silence. Mordak smiled grimly. The humans knew they were beaten. Perhaps they would finally understand the futility of resisting hegemony power. Begin the attack. All ships are to concentrate fire on the human vessel. I want nothing left but atoms. But aboard the dauntless Dawn, Nari was deep in the ship's reactor room, carefully removing the safety systems that had kept the fusion core stable for 40 years. Her hands shook as she worked, not from fear, but from the knowledge of what she was about to unleash. Fusion cascade initiated, she reported to the bridge. 28 minutes until critical mass. All ships, Mordak commanded, open fire. The space around the dauntless Dawn erupted in energy beams and missile explosions. The cargo ship's shields flared and failed within seconds. Energy blasts began tearing through the hull. Shields down, Sojin reported as the bridge shook violently. Hull breaches on decks 3 and 4. Return fire, Tai-Ho ordered. All weapons. The dauntless Dawn struck back with her exotic arsenal. Quantum torpedoes phased through enemy shields, destroying 12 ships in the first volley. The gravity disruptor crushed a heavy cruiser into a ball of twisted metal. Nanite swarms consumed 3 destroyers from the inside out, but it was not enough. For every hegemony ship they destroyed, 10 more took its place. The cargo ship was slowly being torn apart by overwhelming firepower. Hull integrity at 20%, Minsuk reported as another explosion rocked the ship. We're not going to last much longer. How much time left on the cascade? Tai-Ho asked. 15 minutes, Nari replied through the static-filled intercom. In the reactor room, Nari worked frantically to keep the fusion reaction stable until the critical moment. The stellar destabilizer had turned their ship's power core into something unprecedented in galactic science, a controlled supernova. When it reached critical mass, the explosion would be visible from 1,000 light-years away. Admiral, the hegemony tactical officer reported, the human ship is still fighting. Their weapons are destroying our fleet faster than predicted. Mordak watched his ships die on the tactical display. Even trapped and outnumbered, the dauntless Dawn was a deadly opponent. Her impossible weapons carved through his fleet like a knife through paper. "How many ships have we lost?" 43 so far, sir." "Unacceptable. Order all ships to close, to point-blank range. Overwhelm them with sheer numbers." As the hegemony fleet pressed closer, the dauntless Dawn fought her last battle. Every weapon Nari had built over the past year fired continuously, turning space into a graveyard of alien ships. But the cargo ship was dying. Systems failed one by one as enemy fire penetrated her hull. The bridge was filled with smoke and sparks from damaged equipment. 5 minutes to critical mass," Nari reported. Taeho looked at his crew. Min Seok, so young and brave. So Jin, who had given up her military career to serve on a rusty cargo ship. Na Rai, whose brilliant mind had turned their vessel into the most feared ship in the galaxy. "It's been an honor serving with you," he said simply. "The honor was ours, Captain," So Jin replied. As the hegemony ships closed in for the kill, the fusion core of the dauntless Dawn reached critical mass. In the reactor room, Nari watched the readings climb toward the point of no return. "Critical mass achieved," she announced. 30 seconds to cascade. The cargo ship that no one had feared was about to become the brightest star in the galaxy. The dauntless Dawn hung in space like a wounded animal surrounded by predators. Her hull was broken in a dozen places, atmosphere venting from ruptured compartments. Around her, 200 hegemony warships closed in for the final kill. Admiral Mordak watched from his flagship as energy beams tore through the human cargo ship's remaining defenses. After months of humiliation, the ship that had terrorized his empire was finally beaten. 10 seconds to weapons range, his tactical officer reported. "All ships are ready to fire." "Excellent. This time we will not underestimate them." But in the reactor room of the dying cargo ship, Engineer Kim Na-ri watched her instruments climb toward impossible numbers. The fusion cascade was 20 seconds from completion, 20 seconds until the dauntless Dawn became a miniature supernova. "All hands," Captain Lee Tae-ho announced over the ship's intercom. "Prepare for final detonation. It has been an honor." On the bridge, pilot Choi Min-seok gripped his controls with white knuckles. Weapons Officer Park So-jin stood at attention, watching the enemy fleet on her tactical display. None of them showed fear. They had made their choice. "Admiral," the hegemony sensor operator called out, "I'm reading strange energy patterns from the human ship. Their power core is showing massive instability." Mordak frowned. "Instability? The readings don't make sense, sir. It's like their fusion reactor is trying to become a star." For the first time in the battle, Mordak felt a chill of worry. The humans had surprised him too many times with impossible weapons. What if this was another trap? "All ships, maintain distance. Do not approach the human vessel." But his order came too late. In the reactor room of the dauntless Dawn, the fusion cascade reached critical mass. Engineer Nari had turned their simple cargo ship into something that had never existed before. A controlled stellar explosion contained in a metal hull. "Cascade complete," she whispered into her communicator. "See, you on the other side." The explosion began in the ship's reactor room and spread outward at the speed of light. For one brief moment, the dauntless Dawn became brighter than the system's sun. The energy release was so massive that it created its own gravity well, warping space and time around the dying ship. Admiral Mordak had just enough time to whisper, "Impossible," before the shock wave reached his flagship. The artificial supernova consumed everything within 50,000 kilometers. Hegemony dreadnoughts that had taken decades to build simply vanished in the inferno. The largest fleet ever assembled by any galactic power was erased from existence in less than 30 seconds. The explosion was so bright that it could be seen from neighboring star systems. On planets hundreds of light-years away, astronomers detected the impossible energy signature of a star being born and dying in the same instant. When the light finally faded, nothing remained where the great battle had taken place. No ships, no debris, no trace that 200 vessels and their crews had ever existed. The dauntless Dawn had taken Admiral Mordak and his entire fleet with her into death. The news of the fleet's destruction spread through hegemony space like wildfire. A single human cargo ship had annihilated the largest military force in galactic history. The explosion had been visible from a dozen worlds, proof that the impossible had actually happened. Chancellor Quindar of the Hegemony High Command stared at the empty tactical display in his war room. Every red dot that had represented a ship in Mordak's fleet had simply disappeared. How? He demanded of his military advisors. How does one cargo ship destroy an entire armada? We don't know, sir, replied General Kolvash. The explosion was unlike anything in our databases. The energy release was equivalent to a stellar collapse. You're telling me the humans have weapons that can create artificial supernovas? It appears so, sir. Quindar felt the weight of empire crushing down on him. For 1,000 years, the hegemony had dominated the galaxy through superior technology and overwhelming force. Now, a species they had dismissed as primitive had demonstrated weapons beyond their understanding. What is the status of our other fleets? Scattered throughout the galaxy, sir. But morale is... Kolvash hesitated. Speak freely. Collapsing, sir. Ship crews are refusing assignments to human sectors. Some captains have requested transfers to the far rim. They're afraid. Afraid. The word hung in the air like a curse. Hegemony forces had never known fear before. They had been the monsters that others feared. There's something else, sir, another advisor said quietly. We're receiving reports of rebellions in 12 sectors. Subject species that have been loyal for centuries are declaring independence. Why now? They saw the explosion, sir. They know that if one human ship can destroy our greatest fleet, perhaps the hegemony is not as invincible as we claimed. Across the galaxy, the impossible victory of the dauntless Dawn became legend. On worlds that had never heard of humans, people spoke in whispers about the cargo ship that had become a star. Resistance movements that had been crushed for generations suddenly found new hope. The Velthari Confederation formally withdrew from the Hegemony Alliance. The Zornak Empire expelled all Hegemony administrators from their worlds. Species that had been enslaved for centuries began to remember what freedom felt like. In human space, the story spread even faster. The crew of the dauntless Dawn became heroes whose names were carved into monuments on every human world. Captain Lee Tae-ho, pilot Choi Min-seok, weapons officer Park So-jin, and engineer Kim Na-ri had sacrificed their lives to save not just Earth, but all of humanity. Children in schools learned their names alongside the greatest heroes in human history. Starships were named after them. Their story became a reminder that even the smallest and most ordinary people could change the fate of the galaxy. But perhaps the most important consequence was what happened to the hegemony itself. Chancellor Quindar's government, built on the idea of absolute power, could not survive the proof of its weakness. Within 6 months of the Dauntless Dawn's final battle, the hegemony began to collapse. Rebellions erupted on 100 worlds. Client species declared independence. Hegemony fleets found themselves fighting desperate holding actions instead of wars of conquest. The empire that had seemed eternal was crumbling from within. On Earth, President Sarah Chen stood before the Global Assembly to deliver a speech that would be remembered for centuries. Today we remember 4 ordinary people who became extraordinary, she said. Lee Tae-ho was a cargo ship captain who had never fired a shot in anger. Choi Min-seok was a young pilot fresh out of military service. Park So-jin was a weapons officer, looking for a quiet life. Kim Na-ri was an engineer who just wanted to build interesting things. She paused, looking out at the assembled representatives from every human world. They were not super soldiers or tactical geniuses. They were not chosen by destiny or blessed by fate. They were simply 4 humans who refused to accept that evil could triumph over good. When the galaxy's greatest empire came for our worlds, they stood in its way with nothing but an old cargo ship and the determination to do what was right. The speech was broadcast throughout human space and beyond. On alien worlds where the hegemony's power was breaking down, people heard about the 4 humans who had changed everything. The story spread through underground networks and whispered conversations. 1 year after the battle, the Hegemony High Command officially withdrew all forces from human space. It was not surrender, no formal treaty was signed. It was simply acknowledgement that the cost of fighting humans had become too high. Chancellor Quindar himself was overthrown in a coup led by his own generals. The new government promised a return to traditional hegemony values, but they were careful not to mention humans in their speeches. Some fears ran too deep to ignore. The Free Worlds Coalition, the alliance of species that had escaped hegemony control, grew from a dozen worlds to over 1,000. They adopted the image of the Dauntless Dawn as their symbol, a reminder that tyranny could be defeated by those brave enough to stand against it. On the anniversary of the final battle, memorial services were held throughout human space. In the Rigel system, where New Sol Colony had been saved, they built a monument visible from orbit. It showed 4 figures standing together on the bridge of a cargo ship, looking out at the stars with determination. The inscription was simple. They sailed into legend aboard a ship no one feared, until it broke an empire. But perhaps the most fitting memorial was built on Earth itself, in the spaceport where the Dauntless Dawn had once loaded cargo and fuel. It was not a grand statue or imposing building. It was a simple cargo ship, old and patched and unglamorous. A plaque by the entrance read, "This vessel represents all the ordinary ships crewed by ordinary people who do extraordinary things when the galaxy needs them most. In memory of the Dauntless Dawn and her crew, who proved that heroism comes in many forms, visitors could walk through the ship's narrow corridors and cramped quarters. They could see the kind of life the crew had lived before they became legends." Children often asked their parents why the heroes hadn't chosen a better ship, something newer and more powerful. The answer was always the same. They didn't choose the ship chose them. And when the moment came, it was enough the galaxy had learned a lesson it would not soon forget. Power did not always rest with the strongest or the largest. Sometimes it below.